Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the AMI series of Mining Coffee Chats. We appreciate your patience. We took a 2-month hiatus. It must be the Canadian in me that decided to take a break for 2 months. And since several of you come from that part of the world, I know that it's difficult to get people in the summer months. But we, of course, have all been witness to the electoral changes in Peru. And even though we did address the upcoming elections in Peru back in March, the results of that election, the political debate that has amassed since then, the concerns of the mining industry, all obliged us to come back to Peru and have another discussion. And I'm very pleased to be joined by just a wonderful cast of experts. Those of you who were listened to the March event will remember Raziel Zisman. Raziel, I've known for quite a while now. He's a very experienced mining investor and now advisor to mining companies, has operated across the region, knows Peru extremely well. Any of you who've been in mining in Peru in the last 10 years will recognize Miguel Inchaustegui, former Minister of Mines and Energy of Peru, now an advisor to the industry as well. I'm very pleased to welcome to our panel Daniel Palomino Seguín of Muñiz Law. Daniel not only runs the mining practice of his law firm, but is also a professor of law. And I think that his insight on the changes potentially legislatively, regulatorily will be really interesting. And those of you who've attended our calls in the past will recognize Nick Copeland. Nick is a 2-decade veteran of security issues in Latin America, runs a firm called Above Ground Risks, and has been very active in Peru in the last 6 months. And for that very reason, we wanted his perspective, particularly around the traditional risk issues in Peru, which have been for years local engagement, local community opposition, local entanglement of different interests. So thank you all, gentlemen, for joining the call. Thank you, thank you, audience, for joining us. I just want to refresh people's memories as to how we conduct these. I have prepared a set of questions for our panel that we will discuss, but we will leave time towards the end to address questions that you post. And if you could post those in the chat mode and make sure that you're addressing it to everyone so everyone can see your question. And we will get to those questions towards the end. We'll do our best. However, we are respectful of everyone's time. So we will close the event at the top of the hour. So without further ado, if I could turn first to my friend Raziel, because frankly, Raziel, you've done it all in this sector. You've got a great broad perspective, and I think not just with time, but being able to compare Peru with other jurisdictions. Give us a sense, you're constantly in communication with the mining investment community, particularly in Canada, juniors and such. What are those investors telling you that they're most worried about right now in Peru?
John, good day. Thank you for having me again on your platform, which fulfills a very important role. The mining sector has, generally, they like Peru, but they have concerns, and the concerns are not new. The election has brought a number of issues to a head, but in my view, it is not all negative. There's a challenge. You have a left-wing administration that came to power as a result of an electoral process that gave the world and the electors in Peru a dual choice between Keiko and Castillo, neither of which was ideal for a lot of people. But what do we see today? The specter of a post-Evo Morales-style Chavismo in Peru is receding, and it's receding on the reality of the challenges the Castillo administration faces by the fact they do not control Congress, that the mining sector is mature and has the ability to communicate with the government by the fact that both the ministers of energy and mines and the minister of economics understand the importance of the mining sector in Peru, which represents a very large part of foreign exchange in the form of exports, over 50%, and around 20% of gross national product. And what I see evolving is a dialogue that has an opportunity to resolve, if properly managed, some of the issues that were challenging the mining sector in Peru prior to the Castillo administration, including issues of social license, issues of the fact that funds destined for the development of the regions were not being deployed appropriately for many reasons. It's not a Peru-related problem, and hopefully if one applies the ICMM principles in Peru, which is something that the government seems to advocate and will likely receive well, we could have a very interesting outcome. Peru, and this may sound idealistic, but there's no reason we should not aim for it. Peru could become, again, a mining jurisdiction that attracts the attention for the right reasons. Remember some of the issues that the current Castillo administration advocates, including the tax on super profits, is something that was tried in Australia, was implemented in Australia with terrible results. So it is not just the idea, but how you implement it. And you cannot kill the goose that lays the golden eggs. And at the same time, you cannot ignore it. So to sum up, concerns continue, of course, but Peru suddenly hasn't become a different country from pre-Castillo to post-Castillo. And in a sense, as a bookend, the demise of the leader of the Sendero Luminoso just now, it allows us to reflect that people were concerned that Castillo will lead to a resurgence of a Sendero Luminoso style far left and insane administration. And this puts to rest one chapter in Peru, I think, and Peru needs to contemplate the possibilities that could come up from strong internal dialogue among the regions, not just from the capital, and for the mining sector to play a very important role in the development of the regions.
Right, thank you. I think one of the things that was sort of current throughout your entire message there was institutionality. And I think that the world was pleasantly surprised by Peru's ability to flex its institutionality as it dealt with a very contentious election that could have, and perhaps in years past would have, resulted in a much uglier ending. Came through it peacefully, came through it perhaps not with consensus, but came through it with a concrete end that allowed it to move on. And I think that's fundamental. And as you say, there's enough checks and balances with the legislature and with the mining code itself that perhaps should put us at more ease than the way the media portrays things. Miguel, as former Minister of Mines and Energy, you're very familiar with that careful balancing act that a minister must perform between calming mining investors on the one hand, as well as placating the demands of so many other branches of government who look to mining to pay the bill and want more out of the mining sector. So give us a sense of what's going on right now in your former ministry. What are specifically, what are the priorities set by President Castillo in terms of his vision of the future of mining in Peru? And how will Minister Ivan Merino be discussing that vision with the mining sector leaders? Will it be in a group discussion as the Ollanta administration did, for instance? Will it be one-on-one with the major miners? Where do you see common ground? Where do you see the government and mining companies seeing eye to eye? And where do you see which issues are likely to cause tension and friction between government and the industry? It's a lot there in that question.
Yes. Thanks for the invitation, John, to participate in the important event. I consider it important to first tell you that in Peru, since August of this year, we have a new national government. The government is made up of a left-wing party that management to win the election in the second round by a very small difference, 44,000 votes. No? And therefore, the party that is leading the government does not have a majority in Congress. And most important is that the most important decisions in all economic sector are necessarily approved in Congress. And there, the national government does not have a majority. Decisions such as, for example, new taxes, nationalization of companies, and other necessarily have to be reviewed and approved in the Congress. Additionally, because the current government is from the left-wing party, there obviously is concerns that the government will make some decision that cause investors in the mining sector to evaluate other countries to make their investments. However, due to the great potential that Peru has in mining exploration, the mining projects that are currently being built, and the important portfolio of mining projects that exist in Peru, I believe that investors at this moment are the expectation of the big decision that the new government makes. At this point, I consider that what was announced by President Castillo at the time of assuming the position of president, regarding that all mining projects have to have a social profitability, and that social profitability is more than having the social lines to operate, should be explained in more detail by the Minister of Energy and Mines and the Minister of Economy and Finance. No? The vision that this government has, that President Castillo has explained about the mining, is interesting because if the current government discards some ideas that it has expressed during the electoral campaign, such as new constitutions, nationalizations of the some companies, and the new tax, and developers in more detail what is related to social profitability, focusing on the generation of value for all actors related to this important activity, and with the resource currently obtained. Work is done on closing the large gaps that exist around the mining projects. It will be possible not only to promote an important activity, to generate resource for Peru, but at the same time, it will be possible to reduce the existing gaps in health, education, and productivity development. I believe that if we see the glass as half full and not as half empty, we are facing an opportunity to achieve as a result of multi-stakeholders dialogue. Define in the best way the concept of social profitability. Now in the world, for example, there is talk about conscious capitalism, circular economy, and share value. I believe that the government of Peru could have in these initiatives that are being developed in the world important inputs to define in a participatory way the concept of social profitability. We know that the Minister of Energy and Mines is holding meetings with the mining companies, with the communities, and with the local authorities. And in all their meetings, he is explaining in more detail what President Castillo has indicated, and it is said that these governments will promote projects with social profitability and promoting territorial development where mining projects are located. In view of this, and taking into account that the GDP ground projects in Peru, 10.5% for the 2021 and 40.8% for 2022, that the Minister of Economy and Finance has defined are based mainly of the good performance of mining, due to the high price, obviously, for the metals, and because a greater production is projected from the new Mina Justa, and the startup of the Quellaveco mine will take place, and Poromocho mine in the center of Peru. I believe that this will encourage that the national government to have the best dispositions to reach agreements that are win-win with the mining companies putting development of the sustainable mining and mining with purpose and the center of the all discuss and all evaluation in the country.
Thank you. I'm gonna put aside this term social profitability because I want us to discuss it as a group towards the end, because I think, you know, to me, the word profitability is a very quantifiable metric. And I'm very curious to see how they're going to define that. But let me ask you this. When Ollanta came to power, and he came to power when resource prices were high, part of his platform was that he wanted to, you know, make sure that more of mining profits stayed within Peru, and the mining industry very wisely, proactively approached the government as a group and opened the discussions, and in fact offered right away a sort of form of concession in terms of willing to, you know, change some of the taxation royalty positions of the industry. Where is that? Where are we in that process? Has the government sat down yet with industry? Is it sitting down with individual companies, or is it sitting down with the industry as a whole? Have they had any initial discussions?
In this moment, only the Minister of Economy and Finance, Pedro Franque, mentioned that in the next month, we propose a new tax, mining tax in the sector, but probably the idea of the government is to evaluate with all sector, probably with the Association of Mining in Peru, and talk about how is the best way to increase the tax, mining tax in the sector. But the position of the mining association said that it's not necessary to increase the tax because the high price in this moment generate increase the tax during these years, because how you mentioned is true. In the beginning of the Ollanta governments, Ollanta with the mining association defined and agreed to the new taxes, and the new taxes that now exist is established. If the price of the metals high, the tax high too, no? And for this reason, probably now exists the possibility that the Minister of Economy mentioned the new tax, but obviously the Minister Pedro Franque mentioned that it's necessary to talk with the associations of mines and obtain an agreement in the round table talk with the miner association in Peru, no? And I hope and I wait that this is the good way in this moment, because the idea is not that the minister propose one new tax and the Congress approve immediately. No, we need to necessary a consensus, necessary to talk with all actors and obtain a interesting taxes if it's possible, because Peru is necessary to maintain the competitive in the world. No? Peru is not only actor in the world. It's part of all countries that in this moment competed with more investment in the countries. And for this reason, Peru is necessary to evaluate correctly the new tax, or maybe it's not necessary a new tax. It's maybe only necessary to talk and to implement it correctly the incomes that obtain in this moment for resolve the needs exist around to the mining activities.
Now, you raise a really good point, this notion of competitiveness, which, I think without getting sidelining the debate, it's fair to say that over the last 10 years, there's just been a steady addition to red tape regulations on miners that has hurt Peru's ability to attract exploration activity, and ultimately is going to hurt Peru's ability to compete for new investment, in spite of all its obvious advantages. I want to ask Daniel Palomino to come into discussion at this point. Daniel, you're both an expert on the laws that govern the extractive sector, as well as a professor of law. So let's assume that the mining companies are bracing themselves for some degree of change in regulations and possibly taxation. Please help us separate what regulatory changes will need legislative approval from those that could be initiated by decree. If they require legislative approval, how much support is there in Congress for any changes to the mining code or other relevant regulations? Or better put, what changes could make it through Congress? And for those that require only presidential decree, how quickly can they be implemented? And what legal actions can miners take to slow that process? It's a lot in those questions, and appreciate your input.
Thank you, John. Good morning, everyone. It's such a great pleasure to share this incredible panel with you, gentlemen. And John, in order to answer your questions, I would like to start recalling what was the speech of President Castillo during his campaign and then when he came to power. And we will remember that these announcements were extremely populist, and they were based on this sort of confrontational speech between the rich against the poor people, the indigenous people against the foreign mining companies, and even Peruvian regions against Lima capital. So it's important to keep in mind this narrative in order to understand these kinds of offers and announcements made by President Castillo. I like to the announcements that call my attention are the following three that I will develop right now. The first one is connected to the renegotiation of tax stability agreements. Second is the social profitability concept applicable to mining projects, what Miguel developed earlier. And the last point that I consider is truly important is this kind of new formalization process for artisanal miners. That's something that has been discussed in the last weeks in the government. Well, regarding tax stability agreements, I would say that our current constitution, our rules, our legal framework do not make this announcement possible. It would be unconstitutional. Even though a law is enacted by the Congress, I think that most of the mining investors have all the legal tools in order to defend the tax stability agreements they have enforced. Of course, the government, of course, all states have the right, have the prerogative to increase taxes. However, I'd say that these new changes could not affect those tax stability agreements that have been already signed by mining companies. And in the case it happened, those investors have all the legal measures in order to protect their investments. The other concept that caught my attention is social profitability. Yes, I agree with what was said before. This social profitability must be defined. I remember that both the president of Peru and the Minister of Energy and Mines have been saying that by social and territorial profitability, we should understand economy, mining project that increase the national income, mining projects that provide local benefits, promote the local employment and increase salaries, mining projects that are able to bring technology and transfer technology to the people, mining projects that promote the local culture, respect the mining, respect the environment and ensure the mining closure plan and guarantee the citizen participation, among other concepts. And I think that you probably are thinking, Daniel, but all of these factors already happen, and mining companies, formal mining companies, take into account all of these features in order to planify, in order to plan, and in order to execute a mining project. However, unfortunately, this concept has not been defined in our legal framework yet. What makes it worse is that President Castillo has said that social profitability goes beyond social license to operate. And you will remember that during the last 15 years, we have been dealing with this social license to operate concept with no results. In fact, this conception has been part of the problem and has been part of this source of many social conflicts around mining projects. So it's quite important that the Ministry of Energy and Mines, or even by Congress, this concept may be defined urgently, because we need clear rules, we need legal concepts in order to ensure our legal framework is secure, is accurate, and in order to send the right message to the mining market. Then I would like to jump to the last measure that caught my attention, which is the mining formalization process. Let's see. This administration has announced the need to launch a new mining formalization process for small mining producers and artisanal miners. And what's the problem here? The problem is that during the last 9 years, the Peruvian state has been fighting against illegal mining and promoting this mining formalization with zero results. Unfortunately, we are talking about more than 88,000 people working with no mining title, without environmental certifications, without citizen participation, without access to the surface land. I mean, formal authorization to use the surface land where the mining projects have taken place, among other requirements that are or have to be met by formal miners. So this universe of people working besides the law makes this problem to be solved urgently. And in this particular case, I think that supreme decrees are not applicable. We need a law. We need a law issued by Congress, or maybe a legislative decree. And this legislative measure should take into account that many title holders of mining activities, formal mining activities, have suffered many invasions over their mining rights, over their property rights by these illegal miners. So it's a problem that goes beyond the power of this current administration and must be developed by Congress. So, John, I think those are my thoughts regarding the next measures to be taken by the government. And as I said, regarding tax stability agreements, that's not possible. We cannot modify tax stability agreements in force because there is a prohibition. It's forbidden, not by law, by our constitution, and many tools to protect their investments. Regarding social profitability, I would say that it's necessary to know how this concept will work, because today I'm not sure what is social profitability for legal purposes. Who is going to be the administration? Who's going to be the legal entity in charge of verifying that social profitability is met? Is it a permit? Is it an authorization? Is it a license? When mining companies should meet with social profitability? During the citizen participation, during the environmental impact assessment, during the negotiation to access to the surface land to develop a mining project, or maybe before granting the mining authorization before the Ministry of Energy and Mines. We need a clearer scenario to define what kind of legal vehicles this administration could use in order to make this social profitability real for legal purposes again. And finally, regarding the mining formalization process, I think that definitely it must be developed by Congress, or maybe by the administration by means of legislative decrees. That's my answer, John.
Thank you, Danielle. I think you raise an issue that it was not sort of explicitly worded in my question to you, but is absolutely at the very heart of the issue, and that is regardless of how the rules are made, be it by decree, be it by law, be it created, the inability of the Peruvian government to apply the law, to enforce it, is a genuine issue. And the more complicated the rules, the more idealistic the rules, and this isn't just a Peruvian issue, this is universal, the more difficult it is to enforce. And I think that we did a lot of work around artisanal mining at the beginning of this year for a company that finances gold processing at this sort of independent level, which Peru has a couple of very interesting companies doing that. And they rely upon artisanal miners who don't have their own processing equipment to bring them their ore. And what was very clear is that, everybody sort of looks at artisanal or informal mining, and, depending on your political proclivity, you'll sort of use artisanal, informal, illegal. But the point is that these activities take place in the most underdeveloped, remote parts of Peru. And, they'll send in the army every once in a while. But at the end of the day, when you send in 200 troops to enforce anything, they'll hear you coming days before. And, it's just an impossible thing to police. And there's plenty of mechanisms in place, including in Europe, the organizations that ultimately smelt the gold and turn it into bullion. They're trying to enforce up the supply chain a degree of transparency, but even that at the end of the day is an idealistic exercise if you don't have the enforceability mechanisms on the ground. And with that, I want to bring in Nick Copeland, because Nick operates on the ground. He specializes in, where the rubber meets the road, where these rules are actually applied at the local community level. And, you know, Nick, you've done a lot of work in Peru. We've had lots of chats about Peru in the past. And what I'd like to ask you is, you know, big question here. Why does Peru have more local mining conflicts than almost any jurisdiction in the Americas, number one? And what can miners do to mitigate local opposition risk, especially if the president of their country seems to be fanning the flames of this idea that mining companies have to give more to their communities. Mining companies have to do more to strengthen social profitability, not just financial profitability. And where does the responsibility, or realistically, where does the responsibility divide between what mining companies ought to do and what the government ought to do?
Great questions, John, for sure. You know, when you look at the Observatorio de Conflictos Mineros de América Latina, OCMAL, interestingly, statistically, right now, there are 284 conflicts related to mining across the region. And it's correct that Peru is up there with 17% of those conflicts, so 46 named and recorded. In fact, Mexico has a little bit more, 20%. But I think Peru is so emblematic, and because of the magnitude of the conflicts, the duration and the severity. There are fatalities. The conflict can last years. There are blockades and even ultimately cancellations of multi-billion projects from Conga to now Tia Maria. So I think that's why it captures the attention in a big way as a country. And it appears sometimes that it's a country when a project no va, it really is not going to go. And when you look at the numbers, interestingly, 50% of the conflicts in the region, 162, are primarily around water. And in Peru, water is, as I say, vida, life. And so it's always sí al agua, no a la mina. And when I traveled through Valle de Tambo looking at the Tia Maria protests, pretty much got caught up in it myself back in late 2019, you know, the flags, the graffiti, all of it was no a la mina, sí al agua. So it's all about, in the Peruvian context, water in many respects, and the livelihood issue around it. And with the coastal elites and the high Andean populations, there is a difference between, say, a Chile and a Peru. You have a lot of desert in Chile, whereas in the high Andes, the populations there are subsistence farmers primarily. And so water is fundamental to their way of life. And mining can affect the water table, it can affect the water resource. So I believe that on top of division, distrust that is centuries old between different sections of class and population, even racism there and exclusion, you have the fundamental right to work and bring food to the table that people will defend. And they'll defend sometimes with their lives. And that threat to their livelihoods creates fear. And with poverty and inequality in the mix, and a limited government capacity in these very remote areas, typically, you have all the ingredients for large-scale and enduring conflict, sadly. That's not to say that very successful engagement strategies can't be created, but that shared value can sometimes be difficult to find if you're primarily focused on agriculture and water, and mining offers a different future for you. Then in terms of what companies can do proactively in that, and really, heading to the reality today, I think at the moment it's still a wait and see period. The government has shown it wants to be proactive, with the Prime Minister personally getting involved in Las Bambas, for instance. But it seems that they're making quite a lot of noise, but they have no clear sense of what their objectives are. The Prime Minister seems to be headstrong. The Minister is very reserved. It's early days. For major miners in Peru, they should possibly prepare for the reduced support from regional and national government, including a lack of police and public security, particularly in the case of social conflict. They possibly should obviously look at avoiding social conflict at all costs. They're not going to be on the right side of the negotiation table if that occurs. At the moment, the government is saying some of the right things in terms of being neutral, but how long that will last when they're tested, when their voting base is under pressure, remains to be seen. Some miners we know are reconsidering project expansions and other major movements which could cause or are causing grievances. And some overdue decisions, such as reducing the impact of distribution by truck haulage, in the case of Las Bambas, probably should be taken. It's high time. In that, contingency planning and ensuring that vulnerability is reduced and that your stakeholder engagement strategy is working, and that the vulnerable populations are receiving benefits, that where there's an opportunity to give them a helping hand, particularly oxygen related to COVID, now is the time. And many have already well begun that. But it's a slightly fragile situation, and many are waiting to see.
I think you underline a really important message here, and that is, in the past, mining companies relied upon or always had the back of support in the president's, in the executive branch. The executive branch may have had its hands tied in the recent years in its ability to sort of come to the aid of a particular project, but they didn't work against you. Essentially, the executive branch, relies on that taxation income and was doing all it could to keep mining projects viable. If you have a government in Lima that at best is neutral and possibly, because it doesn't fully understand how the industry acts as a social player, has a therefore negative opinion, this means that your engagement with local communities and actually getting the local communities to lobby on your behalf with the national government becomes that much more important. And I think that's, we've been saying for years, and I know you've been echoing this, Nick, that engagement with the Ministry of Mines and with the upper echelon in Lima is important, but of even greater importance is winning hearts and minds locally. And I think that message becomes that much more important now. We have a couple of questions coming in, and I want to remind the audience to please post your questions in the chat mode, and we will quickly get to those. But I wanted to ask Raziel one more question, and that is, and I brought this up earlier, that Peru has been suffering a sort of dwindling exploration pipeline in recent years because of the increasing regulatory hurdles of starting projects in Peru. Well, you've got very high resource prices now. It looks like we may very well be on the cusp of a new commodity super cycle with both high commodity rates and low interest rates, which is great for just about every commodity, including industrial and precious metals. Peru is, benefiting from high gold prices. It's benefiting from high copper prices. And those prices should continue to be at historical above average prices for a while. But at the same time, all the issues we've raised in this call, all the things that you know about Peru, is Peru going to be able to capture its share of exploration projects over the next 5 years? Why or why not?
Thank you, John. Excellent question. Peru is a mature mining jurisdiction with a lot of mining districts that are active. Exploration will continue, particularly in relation to existing projects. The best place to find a new mine is close to existing mines. So that particular sector of exploration will continue, much of it driven by the mining companies themselves that need to secure new resources to be converted to reserves in the future. The question is, will junior miners be attracted to Peru? Many have left Peru or have lowered the level of investment over the past few years. And I don't see that trend changing significantly. If a particularly strong discovery is made by a junior, they'll be able to finance part of it, or they'll be able to attract a senior partner. But to answer your question, Peru has a pipeline of projects to be built. I think it's exceeding 40. I think the number used is 46 in the media, representing about over $50 billion worth of investment if those projects were to be developed. That on its own is a tremendous pipeline of economic activity related to mining, which will by necessity motivate the explorationists to participate. The other thing to remember is there are many people in Peru who are seasoned veterans of the industry. This is what they do. They need to earn a living. They'll continue working at a lower pace, perhaps, but it will continue. And this, I personally know a number of them. They'll have less money, but there are better tools coming to the industry. There is remote sensing, there is drone usage, better interpretation of existing data. Just reanalyzing past exploration results would lead to discoveries. So Peru has the blessings of many experienced people, both native and expatriates, who've made Peru their home. And in that sense, the industry is not going to go away. I just want to add one comment on our overall discussion. Chile for many years was seen as the bastion of stability in the mining sector, a mature, sophisticated, stable country. And look what happened the last few years with a constitutional dialogue that brought in security. And Peru, in a sense, benefited. And while Chile had a bit of an earthquake, Peru continued. Now Peru is in a similar situation where the constitution comes up for the discussion and so on. I view, in a sense, a congruence of interest by Peru and Chile as senior mining jurisdictions in South America to together come out of this conundrum as a more serious, mature jurisdictions that will bring together government interests and the mining sector interests to result in better governance, better channeling of resources, and a fairer allocation of the benefits from it.
I agree that there is plenty of experienced operators in Peru who can speak sensibly and with sensitivity to the issues raised by the government today. I worry that, this pandemic and the social distancing it causes, and Peru, of course, the infection levels have come way down, but there's still a lack of there's a lack of meetings of people going into one room and having a kind of debate around these issues. And I worry that as a new government that may not be that informed about this, such an important industry, is literally not having enough discussions with the people who do understand the industry, who do understand the real economic and social issues of the industry, who understand where mining companies are making great efforts and having success, And that dialogue's not going on because of the pandemic. I worry about that, not just in Peru and in many other places. I want to address and combine a couple of really good questions, one from Ricardo Torreblanca and one from Norman Gridley. Ricardo says that, in Peru, people talk about social license, but it doesn't actually exist as a legal concept. Now we have social profitability. So my question would be to the panel, whoever wants to address it, is when are we going to see a set of rules around these issues? Call it social license, call it social profitability. And secondly, who is masterminding that process? I mean, is there an academic or a series of academics, or is it the Mining Association in Peru that has these formulas, that has something that can be turned into applicable regulations, enforceable regulations? Has that intellectual process been drafted yet? And are there any concrete ideas that are being seriously considered in the formation of a new set of regulations or laws? Can anybody even speculate on that? It's an open question to you all.
Well, I can make a comment. Social license to operate is a global issue for the mining sector. It's as simple as that. In Canada, where I reside, we have issues with in native communities, for example, the issue of informed consent, full, transparent, informed consent. So that's at the lower level. But I think what the government is addressing, you don't just sprinkle a few benefits to a community and buy your way out of your obligations with the local community. That's the whole issue. Where I see the silver lining in this idea of social profitability, I'll give you an example. President Castillo comes from the education, he's a teacher. And one of the things he said during his campaign, he wants to spend a much larger proportion of gross national product in education. And the mining industry could take this as an opportunity. Peru pioneered a concept that is been copied in other jurisdictions of obras por impuestos. Works in lieu of taxes because mining companies can implement projects such as building a bridge more efficiently than giving the money to the government in taxes, and then there is a bidding process that has corruption involved, delays, and so on. So if the mining industry could take a proactive approach, combined with the ICMM, which is the International Council of Mining and Metals, and set up a dialogue with the government, with local communities in a transparent way. We're all meeting on this virtual platform quite effectively. And over 2 years of COVID, people have learned how to use this. And it makes it much easier to communicate and set standards of good dialogue, a respectful dialogue. And the mining industry could suggest to government, look, you are interested in education. Let us do obras por impuestos with education. We commit over the next decade to make sure the literacy level and the level of high school completion in the regions of Peru is increased. Let's work together, not just the mining sector, then bring the agricultural sector, bring the telecommunications sector, advanced telemedicine, for example. These are all initiatives, and the mining industry, and I hope some senior members of the industry will watch this, could take this as an opportunity to say, yes, this is what we want, because converting one line that I'd like to use is the mining industry is an opportunity to convert natural capital into human capital. I mean, and this has happened in every country where mining has happened, in Canada as well. Remote areas of Canada today have prosperous cities, universities, hospitals, educated communities as a result of mining over 2, 3, 4 generations. And this can be done. There is no reason it cannot be done. Issues of water, of course, is not a dichotomy of agua, agua or minería. You can combine both. It's a matter of communicating. In Chile, mining companies purchase water. They put desalination plants. So there are ways of tackling this in a respectful, mutually respectful way. But if you try to bringing a large mining operation with a nominal social license where you put a little school and give a little money and quiet the opposition, that is not a long-term solution to you just put a blanket over a problem and not look at the future. Ultimately, what you want is the kids of the children of the community to become the managers of your operation, 20, 30, or their children. Because they go through the educational system, they see what mining is about, they study geology, they study management, and they come in and participate. That is, in my view, is a good recipe for success, and Tamina has done it.
Okay, in my opinion, John, I believe that I agree with Raziel. The social lines is now is one topic that all in the world to talk about this, no? Including in the ICMM, for example, not only talk about the social lines to operate, talk about the social acceptance, because the big objective is how to obtain the acceptance of all stakeholders. I think this is not, the point is not what if exists or not a legal norm to establish the social acceptance. Obviously no, but in the reality, in the fact, if not obtain the social acceptance, if not obtain the social license or any word, if not obtain this, it's difficult to continue the exploration, operation, or any activity around to the mining sector. In Peru, in all the world. And for these reasons, the ICMM, for example, now talk about we need more collaborative with all actors, with all stakeholders. The ICMM proposed that, for example, how to collaborate around to the water in all operations, how to manage correctly the dams, how to generate more energy renewal. It's a different topics around to the only point, the sustainable. I think that now is a new paradigm in all sectors, but especially in mining. The new paradigm is how the mining have obtained how to collaborate with generate development for all stakeholders. It's difficult that any industry, and in special of mining, to generate good results, but the countries, the people, the communities not improve the quality of life. It's difficult. And who is the responsibility of this? Obviously, the national government, the local authorities, because the companies pay the tax, and the tax receives the national government, and the national government is responsible to resolve the needs. But the reality, if you review the 20, 30, 40 years ago, it's difficult that in the case of Peru, it's difficult that the national government to resolve the needs. And for this reason exists the difference. The mining company is a good steps, working very, very good in the standards or environmental standards, but the problem of the needs is not resolved because the national government don't have the skills. In my opinion, the new paradigm is how to the mining collaborate and resolve the needs, at the same time to the mining to building on the mining to operate. Obviously, this is not easy, and for example, now in the funds of investment, BlackRock, the CEO Larry Fink mentioned that it's necessary to the companies have a propose, and not only have a propose, the lead that made this propose. I think in the case of the mining sector, it's necessary to how to collaborate with all stakeholders and resolve the needs, or to give the skills to the national government, to local authorities to resolve the skills in the short time. And in my opinion, the social lines or social acceptance is not a legal term. It's a concept. It's a attitude. It's the behavior that the company need to relation with all actors when the company operate.
Thank you, Miguel. I'm gonna stop there because we've reached the top of the hour. I do want to make one final comment, and I think that as someone who's worked in this industry for about 15 years, as essentially an outsider analyst, I find it very frustrating that because these issues have been brewing for a long time. But when I go to New York, when I go to London, when I go to Toronto, and I sit down with the bankers who finance projects, they want to see a document that's 40 pages long. 39 pages of those is a technical assessment of the mine telling me whether it's geologically and logistically profitable to extract. And they want 1 page telling me if there's social acceptance. And the reality is that financiers have still not gotten their heads around how to properly measure the social acceptance of a project. So, one thing is to say, how do we regulate it? The other is to say, how do the finance community get their heads around this? Because what's happening is they're not looking at this issue. They're going ahead and financing mines based upon geological and logistical issues and the cost of extraction. And then when a project does get delayed, suspended, canceled because there's such strong opposition to it, whether that opposition comes from a legitimate fear or if it was stoked by, parties who have their own reasons to oppose the mine, that's a whole nother debate. But the point is that the people who finance that mine, they'll say, I didn't see it coming. And I think that you can see it coming. I think that you can survey and over time continue to survey the community support for a project or not. And they have to take that into account. That has to be part of the due diligence process. I don't care how fabulous the ore is underground. If you don't have support above ground, and I'm stealing Nick's company title name here, then you're simply doing yourself a disservice in measuring risk and making that financing decision. So the last shot across the bow goes out to the financiers on the call, who I know are a regular part of our audience and are an absolute essential player in the mining industry, that if projects aren't financed, seriously taking into account social acceptance of a project, then the industry is going to continue to be at loggerheads. I'm going to end it there. I want to thank you all, our panelists, for contributing to this discussion. Clearly, we still have time on our hands to see where this new administration is going to come out in terms of its defining its strategy going forward, given that they have such a small minority in Congress. And this notion of social profitability, it's going to be very interesting to see if Peru sort of invents its own formula, or if they adopt something from University of Queensland or from other sort of thought leaders in this industry, and how, most importantly, how will it be enforced and applied? Because everybody knows how to sing this song, right? We're all in perfect melody around social license. But what does it actually mean to the way we operate and the way we measure profitability in our minds? And I think Peru might be the country that takes the lead in defining that. I hope so. And I hope it's done sensibly. But I want to thank our audience for their questions. I'm sorry we didn't address them all. And I want to invite everyone back on Tuesday, October 5th at the same time, 11 Eastern, for another coffee chat, which we will continue month in, month out. Thanks, everyone. Have a great month ahead, and appreciate your time today.